the goal of this class is that you feel that you understand the process of looking at a piece of modern notation and turning it into a song. Not that you're fast at it or really practiced, but that you understand the process and you can therefore practice it. So, if you have your own copies of the handout, you want to be able to, have a pen and your paper, and you'll be able to write on things. Otherwise, you can follow along with what I'm doing and you'll be fine. Okay. So, the basic process is that we learn the rhythm first. Then it sort of goes into our minds and our bodies. Um, we'll figure out what the note values are and we'll write them under the notes. And then we're going to count and clap the rhythm. Then we're going to decode the pitches. And at first, it won't be very rhythmic, but because we did the rhythm first, it'll underlie your understanding. So we'll decode the pitches, we'll write the letter names above the notes, and then we will find the notes on our instrument, which for today is the piano. It can be your own instrument, whatever you play. You simply need to have a chart that tells you where the notes are on your instrument. Okay, so after you have figured out the rhythm and you have decoded the pitches and can sort of play them on your instrument, then you're going to strive to turn that into music, which means that you need to get your performance needs to become more rhythmic. And to do that, you're going to want to practice short phrases and alternate between clapping and playing the song. That's the overview of the process. And that's the process that you will use anytime you sit down to learn a new song. So we're going to start at the beginning. First of all, our first page, we have note values. Quarter note is colored in, very important. Going back to SCA time period, notes that were colored in were faster and notes that weren't colored in were longer. And that's the first basic thing to know. So a quarter note is going to equal 1. A half note, 1, 2. Dot, put a dot after it and it becomes 1, 2, 3. No tail, whole note, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, when we connect notes, they become faster. So these two notes, oh, wait a minute. I'm jumping ahead. I am so sorry. We're going to go back to quarter notes and we're going to practice clapping them. So quarter notes, 1. Clap with me, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Now, a half note, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Notice that the speed of my counting is constant, but the length of the note that I've clapped changes. So now, dotted half note, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Whole note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, what we have here are a pair of eighth notes, and very often they do come in pairs. And what that means is that we're going to fit 2 notes into the bill, to the beat. So we're going to go twice as fast. 1 and 2, 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and. Sometimes the eighth notes are singles. And then it might just be and. 16th notes are faster. Notice that they have 2 beams instead of 1. Oh, I just realized I have the entire wrong camera on. I am so sorry. All right, here I am. Eighth notes, 1 beam. 16th, 2 beams. 4 of them fit in a beat. 1 E and O, 1 E and O, 1 E and O, 1. Okay, now quarter rest equals 1. Rest, rest, rest. When it's this little dash sitting above the line, 1, 2. Now, when I was a very young piano student, my piano teacher said, think of that as being a top hat. And when it gets so full of rest, it will flip over. And that's what a whole rest looks like. Looks like it's on the bottom of it flipped over. It was so full of rest. And so that is 1, 2, 3, 4. Rest, 2, 3, 4. Now, remember that when we made a dot after the half note, it turned into 3 counts. When we put a dot after the half rest, it turns into 3 counts of rest. Remember our little flags to make the eighth notes? Well, there's this little curly thing here that makes an eighth rest. Okay, so those are the note values. So the next thing, let's see. Okay, now if you have your papers printed out, find page 4, because we are going to want this. So now we're going to look at our first musical example. I am going to write the count underneath, because eventually I'm going to write the names of those notes above. So the counts always go underneath. So the first thing I see is, well, it's not colored in and it has a tail. So I go over here and it's a half note. 1, 2. Now, this one's colored in. That's a quarter note and it equals 1. Another half note. 1, 2. Now, these are beamed together. So that is an eighth note pair. So I'm going to say 1 and. Now, what have I got here? It's not colored in, it has a tail, and it has a dot. Okay, that is my dotted half note. 1, 2, 3. And that is another half note. 1, 2. Now here's that squiggly line that looks kind of like a lightning bolt. That is a quarter rest. So that's a 1. Now, sometimes it's useful to back up a moment and notice that something is repeating. Here we have exactly the same rhythm. The notes are going to be different, but here we are. Here's our half note again. Here's our quarter note. Here's our half note. Now, 1 and. And finally, 1, 2, 3, half note again, 1, 2, and a rest. Sometimes for a rest, I like to parentheses around it to remind myself that it's a rest. Good. So now I'm going to look at this. I'm going to say the counts and I'm going to clap. So 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, and 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, rest. 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, rest. And that is as far as we're going to go. Now, we've figured out the rhythm. Now we need to figure out what to do about pitches. So, okay. So, the treble clef, this little sign at the beginning, tells us that the notes that we're talking about are the higher notes, the notes above middle C, if we were looking at the piano, the notes, the higher end of the piano. So, and this is usually where we'll see um, alto and soprano voices are going to be marked here, are going to be treble clef. Okay, so landmarks. First of all, the treble clef wraps around the G line because it marks G. You can see that that's kind of almost a G. Okay, so that's G. Now, I think mnemonics can be very, very helpful. For no reason other than the randomness of the way our alphabet works. The spaces spell face. F-A-C-E. Okay, going from the bottom up. F, then G on the G line, A, C, E. So that means that the notes that we haven't identified either by the G line or face can be found in between. So, oh, it's the top line. That's right next to E. That must be F. Okay, so super important information. Musical alphabet only goes to G. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Keep going. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. Now it also goes backwards. A, G, F, E, D, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C, B, A. So it's really very useful to be able to go forward and backwards inside that little chunk that is the musical alphabet because music goes up and down. Okay, so our next step is going to be to write in the letters. So our first note is a space, which means we can use the face rule. F, A, C, that's C. This is the same note. It's still C. Here we are again, C. Now, this is where I'm going to go backwards in my musical alphabet. I can look at my chart and go C, B. And I'm still going backwards to A. Now, that's B. I just had it. That's a B and another B. Okay. Now what do I see? This is a line. 1, 2, 3, fourth line up. And that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. That's D. Now, if I didn't have my little piece of paper here, I could also think in my mind F, A, C, and then I want the next note in the alphabet, A, B, C, D, and there's D. And it repeats D and D. And this, oh, what do we do? Then it's a space, F, A, C. It's a line, it's the middle line. And I can go over here and I can see that the middle line is B. And then I'm back to C. And then it repeats. Okay, so that is how I figure out what the names of the notes are. So now my next step is to figure out how to play those notes on my instrument. Now, for those of you that are that play instruments already, your task is probably off the internet or in a beginning book, find the correlation so you know how to finger or play. Find out how to play a C on your instrument, how to play a B and an A and a B, and then you can do that. Today, we're going to use the keyboard. So, things to know. The right end of the keyboard has higher sounds. The left end has lower sounds. High sounds, low sounds. Okay. Landmarks. Our very first landmark is that D is between two black keys. And some people say that D is in the doghouse. And I like to use D as my reference point because everything else you have to think about whether it's right or left. And so if you have any little bits of issues with left and right, which I certainly do and many others do, being able to say, I know it's absolutely in the middle of these two, that is D. Okay. If we remember our musical alphabet, we can figure out where we go. So if that's D, this note is E, this note is F, going forward through the alphabet. Now I'm going backwards, D, C, B, A. Ran out of letters, it must be time for G, F. That's an E, but we don't need it. And that's a D. Okay, so going forward to the right through the musical alphabet makes the pitches get higher. If I play it over here, I'm going to play a D, and then you can hear it. F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F. We're getting higher. If I go the other way, F, E, D, C, B. I'm going lower. Okay, couple more things we need to know. A flat sign lowers the pitch by one key on the piano or one fret on a guitar or ukulele. So here I am. Here's a B. I'm going to go from this white key just to the left one little bit, and that takes me to the B flat. Okay. I could do that here. I could say, that's an E, and I want to find an E flat. There it is. B flat is the most common flat in the SCA period music. And so if you can find B flat reliably on your instrument, that's useful. A sharp sign raises the pitch by one key on the piano or one fret on a guitar or ukulele. So F goes to F sharp. So the sharp sign, F sharp is the most common sharp in SCA period music. So B flat, F sharp. So now we are I'm going to change cameras. And there we go. Okay. So now I see that my first, I'm going to take my music and I'm going to put it over here by the piano. So if you're playing along with me and you have a keyboard and you have the music, you want to get your music so that you can see the keyboard and the music at the same time. And you can also put your little keyboard reference nearby so you can also see it. So I know that I need to find a C. And over here, I look at C and I see it's next to the two black keys. So I find a C. And there it is. It's next to the two black keys. So I need a C, and then I play C again, and then C again. Now, B is right next door. B, A, oh! Okay, things we should not do. We should not jump into playing without looking at the special extra symbols that are going on. So, first of all, ignore the elements in the circle. Number one, this is information that this is showing us what the first few notes in the original manuscript look like, which is kind of cool to know, but not particularly important for us in figuring out how to play the song. So ignore this stuff. We start right here with the C or with the treble clef. Now, the second thing we see, number two, use the B flat through the entire piece. When we have a B flat at the very beginning of the piece or the beginning of the line, we get to remember. We get to remember it's not going to be written in. So when I get to here, I actually want it to say B flat. And I'm going to write that in. B flat. B flat. B flat. Okay. Also, other little things. These little tick marks. Oh, I'm pointing. You can't see what I'm pointing at.
If you bring it up a little bit more, I think we can.
Yeah. So without changing cameras again. So these little tick marks that were here before, those are not ones. Those set off groups of 3 beats. The double dots at the very end tell us to repeat the section. So we're going to play along, get to the dots, go back, and play again. Each numbered section has 2 different endings. This is a numbered, right, this is the first section, it's numbered 1. We play, we repeat, we go back, we play, and instead of playing 1, we play 2 the second time. Going on, we would go here, and then the same thing would happen on the next page. Okay. Do we have the next? And we do actually have the next page. So you can see this is the first ending. And then I go back and I do this again. And then I do the second ending. Going forward to the third section, I go forward, play the first ending, go back, play the second ending. Okay. So, all right. Now that we remember that we need to do something with this B flat, now I'm going to go back and I'm going to say, all right, find my C. It's next to the 2 black keys. Here I am. And another C and a C. Now my B flat. This is important. Here's B flat. B flat, A, B flat, B flat. Okay, now where is D? Oh, right, D was in the doghouse. There it is. And again, C. Where's C? Oh, C is next to the 2 black keys. Here I am. C, I remember B flat. Back to C. Okay. So now I found the notes on the piano. Now I want to think about making them come out a little more musical. So now I'm going to think, how long is that first C? 1, 2, C, 1, 2. These are quicker. B flat, A, B flat. Anytime you have quick notes, you always want to practice the quick notes and their destination. So I see B flat, A is quick, but B flat is my destination. So these are quick, and this is my destination. And then I play it again. Well, that's starting to sound a little bit like music. Let's try it again. 1, 2, 1, 1, 2. Quickly, 1, 2, 3, again. Ooh, that sounded pretty good. Now, we remember from when we figured out the rhythm that the rhythm for the next section is the same. That'll help us. So, now I need to find a D. Okay, and I know that D is in the doghouse. There's my D. So, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2. Oh, I should practice my quick notes. C and B flat and back to C. So I'm going to practice that. C, B flat, C, and I'll do it again. Now I'm going to start my phrase. I'm going to go back to the D's. 1, 2, D, 1, 2, quickly, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Okay, and that is as far as we're going to go with this first song. But I think you see, we learned some things. We learned some basic things about how to find the counts and how to find the letters and where to find the notes on the piano. So we are going to look at another musical example and learn some more things. Okay, changing cameras. Is it that one? No. There we go. Okay. So, meter. We have looked at rhythm already. Rhythm is the pattern that's created by long and short notes. Underneath the rhythm is the beat. The beat is steady. Sometimes notes last 1, sometimes 1, 2, but the beat is steady. Okay, so rhythm is long and short notes, beat is steady. Meter divides music into equal numbers of beats. So we could group them in 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Notice that when I say 1, that's always a little bit louder. I could group in 3. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Terrific. I could group it in 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So, vertical lines called bar lines mark the beginning and ending of each measure. And here I am. Our next musical example is going to be Jubilate Deo. And here, there we go. That's a line, that's a line, that's a line. So those little tick marks that we saw in our first example are they're an attempt by modern transcriber to give a feeling of the period notation, which didn't have bar lines. It had other ways of showing rhythm. And so sometimes modern editors will give us little tick marks instead of those lines. I think sometimes that's useful and sometimes it's not. But anyway, because we are talking about early music, you will see little tick marks instead of bar lines, and I want you to know to not be too thrown off by them. Most of the time in modern music notation, what we have are these vertical lines, and those are bar lines. Okay. Measures are the spaces between the bar lines. That's a measure, that's a measure, that's a measure, that's a measure. And sometimes we say, we're going to start in the fourth measure, and that means 1, 2, 3. There's the fourth measure. Or our leader will say, let's work 3 measures from the end. So that's the end. 1, 2, three measures from the end, and we're all going to start there because we figured out this part of the song, but this part of the song is still needs some help. So we're just going to work on that part. Okay. Now, so we have vertical lines that set the groups apart, and they create measures. At the very beginning, we have something called a time signature, and that time signature indicates the meter. The top number tells us the top note tells us how many beats to the measure. The bottom note tells us what gets a beat. And most of the time, a quarter note gets a beat, and so you'll see 4 on the bottom. But sometimes other things will happen. So 2, 4 means that there's 2 quarter notes in the measure. There we are. Or their equivalent, which would be a half note because that gets 2 beats. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay. So that is meter. The other thing that we need to understand in order to play our next musical example are dotted rhythms. Okay. A dot after a note adds half of the original time to the note value. That sounds a little intimidating and mathematical, but if we go back and we look at our original chart, a dotted half note, okay, adds half of what we already had. Well, we started out with 2. Half of 2 is 1. So that 2 plus 1 more gave us 3. 3 quarter notes in a dotted half note. So, but other things can get dotted. Okay. A dotted quarter note is equal to a quarter note plus half, which is an eighth note. So, the dotted quarter is often followed by a single eighth note. So here I have 1 and 2, and here is the and. So we are going to clap and say dotted quarter eighths. So 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and. Now, for some folks, words go in the brain better than numbers do. And that is perfectly okay. And I always like to find a way to use words to substitute for math if we want to. So instead of saying 1 and 2 and, we're going to say quarter dot eighth. We still have 4 sounds and we've still divided into 3 of them plus 1. So quarter dot eighth, quarter dot eighth, quarter dot eighth. So notice what we have is a longish thing and a quickish thing. Okay, now we're going to look at our next musical example, which is Jubilate Deo. So remembering our original plan was to learn the rhythm, write the notes, and count and clap. Then write the letter names, and then find the notes. So, all right. Now, we're going to look to see, okay, so our first step now is the rhythm. So, okay, remembering that not colored in has a tail, that's a half note, 1, 2. Another half note, 1, 2. Quarter note, colored in, quarter note, 1, 1. Keep going, more quarter notes. More quarter notes. Ooh, here's our dotted quarter. And so we remember that what we want to say here is 1 and 2 The dot is kind of like the 2, and here's the and. Quarter note, 1, quarter note, 1, half note, 1, 2, half note, 1, 2, quarter, quarter, half note. Rest! Oh, okay. There's a convention in modern music which makes me personally quite grumpy, but we have to go along because it's what everybody does, which is that whole note, whole rest, which I told you equals 4, sometimes it just equals a whole measure. And so here it's fills the measure of 2, so that whole rest counts 1, 2. So it makes my mathematical mind sad. But that's what it's going to mean. You're going to see whole rests in measures that are not 4 beats long, and they mean fill the measure with rest. Okay, so now we can clap this. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1. Keep going. 1, 1. Here's our dotted quarter. 1 and 2 and keep going. 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2. Rest. 2. Let's do that again. And I'm gonna point and tap because that's another way to think about it. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, and 2, and 1, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1, 2. Rest. 2. So notice that eighth note was pretty quick. 1 and 2 and 1. Okay. Now we have counted and clapped. So that must mean that it's time to decode the pitches. Alrighty. So now we want this to help us. Okay. So our first pitch, and we checked, there aren't any flats or sharps, so we don't need to worry about that. Our first pitch is a space note, and it's the third up. And I can spell face, F-A-C. That's a C. This is the next letter in the alphabet, A, B, C, D. Keep going. Another one, E, which also checks out with the face plan, F-A-C-E. Now, some of you might remember this by now. This is C, F-A-C. And we're going to do it again. Now we have to go backwards through the alphabet, C, B. Back to C. Space note, I can use the face rule, F-A. And this is a line note. Second line. Oh, this is the line that goes through the curlicue of the G. This is G. And that's the first space. That's F. Okay. Did I have another page that talked about this? Okay. So this is a line underneath the F. I gave you this much because those were the notes that we needed for the first example, and I didn't want to give you too much at once. But now we're going to have to go backwards. We're going to have to expand. So the line under the F has to be backwards in the alphabet. So it was F. We're going backwards. That's E. Here's our F. This is a D. And there's a good mnemonic for this. D hangs down from the treble clef. So that's a D. And we're going to go one note lower, and that is C. Some of you, if you had a tiny little bit of piano once upon a time, know this as middle C. It's the line that has its own little ledger line. We'll talk about ledger lines in a few minutes. Okay, now we have a big jump. What was this? Goes through the line, goes through the curlicue, that's G, and another G. Okay, now we saw this a minute ago. This is C, and that's a rest. Good. Now, so we have written in the notes. The next step was to find and play the notes on your instrument. So now I'm going to take this and put it over here by my piano, and I'm going to change cameras, and we are going to look at what happens next. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to make this turn into a song. So the first thing I see is a C, and over here I'm reminded that C is next to the two black keys. So here I am. This is C. And D is in the doghouse. We remember that one. Next one up is an E. Go back to C. Another C. B is just before it in the alphabet. B. And now C. And how do I find A? Well, I look over at my chart and I see that A is in the middle. A is in between the threes and it's on the right side. There's A. Now I'm going to go back and do that much again, because if I try to do too much at once, it becomes kind of scrambled. So the beginning was C, and then D, and then E, back to C, neighbor, oh, C again, neighbor B, back to C, and then I'm going to go to A. And I'm going to do one more time, and now I'm going to think about how long they last. 1, 2, 1, 2, E, C, C, B, C, A. Okay, now notice that we're going from a space to a line to another space and to another line. They're all in a row. So I know where A is. The next note is G, and then F, and then E. Back to F. D is in the doghouse. I know where that is. And C, which looks just like its friend over here. It's next to the two black keys. But notice that it's lower in sound. Okay. And then I need two G's. And where are the G's? The G's are in the threes on the left side. So there's G. G, G. And then I'm going to go down to C. So now, a good way to practice, especially songs, is that if there's punctuation, that's a good place to turn it into a chunk. So we're going to do the first little phrase, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 measures, and then there's a comma in the words. So 1, 2, 1, 2, E, C, C, B, starting to sound like a song. Now we're going to look at the next chunk, which is, so now I'm going to go jubilate de. Oh, there's my comma, so that's my next chunk. I'm going to start here in the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth measure. Fifth measure. C, A. How do I find A? A is in the threes. There's A, G, F, next door, E, F, D in the doghouse. Now I have to give it rhythm. And as I look at it, mostly they're even except for that measure with the dotted quarter. So I want to think about what that F is the quick note, and it's going to the E. So I'm going to practice going from F to E. F, E, F, E, F, E. And now if I add the G that was before it, 1 and 2, F, E. 1 and 2 and E. Now I can go back to the fifth measure, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and play this whole little phrase. C, A is in the A, F. Oh, excuse me, that's a G. C, A, 1 and 2, F, E. Now F, D in the doghouse, 1, 2, then C, next door, 1, 2, find the G, 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 1, 2. Okay. All right. Now, I was actually a little out of order because we jumped, after we found the pitches, we kind of jumped into learning the song. But let's go back and look at the notes for the extra symbols. Okay, first of all, number 1, the time signature 2/4 tells us that the quarter note gets the beat, and there are 2 beats in the measure. And we saw that. We saw groups of 2. Okay. What is this 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6? What's all that about? This is a round. So if you were to sing it with a bunch of people, someday we get to do that again, the numbers in the circles indicate entrance points for the singers. Okay, so the first group starts here and they sing U, B, and when they get to 2, the next group comes in. When they get to 3, the next group comes in. So these numbers in the circles tell us how to make the round work. Okay, number 3, bar lines. We talked about that. Divide the music into measures. 5, dotted quarter and an eighth. We know what to do with that. Slur. Okay. When we sing this, we have a slur connects 2 notes smoothly together. So we have 2 different pitches on 1 syllable. And I'm just going to demonstrate how that's going to work. Day-o. So I had 2 different pitches on the same syllable. Day-o. So that's a rest. A slur. And I mentioned there's a convention that whole notes and whole rests fill a measure. Okay, so that is the second musical example. Our next musical example, Viva La Musica, actually really only has one thing in it that we haven't seen before. Use F sharp through the entire piece. The time signature 4/4 tells us the quarter note gets the beat, 4 beats in a measure. This is the thing that's this funny symbol here is called a fermata. and it tells us to hold it extra long for dramatic effect or the end of the piece. In this is also around 1, 2, 3 entrance points. And so the fermata is in parentheses, like you would only use it at the end. So this is an end. This is some of the singers are going to finish here. Some of the singers are going to finish here, and some of the fingers are going to finish here. And everybody's going to hold the last note extra long. Okay. I think that I think we're going to move forward. We're going to talk about this F sharp just for a minute, but then I'm going to say that you could probably figure this one out on your own because there's some new things that I want to show you. Okay. Back to here. Okay. So, remembering that this is D in the doghouse, go through the alphabet, D, E, F. There's our F. F, F sharp. So, every time you play an F in this piece, you actually play an F sharp. Okay. But I want to get to we've been looking at notes on the treble clef. We want to look at notes on the bass clef too. Because if you sing bass, if you play a cello or a viola da gamba, you need to know how to read bass clef. And so it's just useful to know how to read bass clef, and we're going to look at that now. Okay, so first of all, the two dots of the F wrap around the F line. Now, if you imagine that this is kind of a line here, and those, if you think of those as lines rather than dots, this whole thing becomes kind of a fancy F, and it marks the F line. There is a mnemonic for the bass clef, for the spaces. All cows eat grass. All cows eat grass. Now, I like to remind my students that the face is above the grass. Okay. And some people will give you mnemonics for the lines as well, but I find that if you have a mnemonic for the spaces and the lines and the spaces and the lines, now you have 4 mnemonics, and you need a mnemonic to sort it all out. So I like to think that if you can figure out what the spaces are and you remember the musical alphabet, you know that these notes are in between. And I think that that just is a little easier to keep sorted in your mind. The face is above the grass. Okay, remember again that the musical alphabet goes over and over. G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Okay. And that you can go backwards. B, A, G, F, E, D, C, B, A, G. So, we are going to look at a song that has some bass clef in it. Oh no, I've had the wrong camera on. Okay. There is my F, marking the F line. All cows eat grass. The face is above the grass. Okay. And now we do want to be on The piano camera.
To be honest, I didn't notice because I was looking at the handout.
Perfect!
So
That's excellent. That is
just
so good to know. Okay, so now we're gonna go. Oh, wait a minute. No, we have to do the rhythm first. Okay. Alrighty. Okay. Rhythm first. But this should be getting a little bit easier. Where is my rhythm page? There we go. Okay. Here we go. Things that we should know. Let's look at this first and then we'll do our counts. Okay, ignore the circled symbols. We have, number 2, we have 4 parts here. The top part uses a treble clef. The second and third part use treble clefs with 8s underneath them. These parts will actually be played an octave lower. Same alphabet letters, but one set lower. Okay, so if I were to play a C over here and go down one set, that's a lower C. So that's what's going to happen with these middle parts. And the reason that we do this is because the notes really truthfully are about half in the bass clef and half in the treble clef, and we have to do something with them. So let's see. The time signature. Ooh. Okay, we'll talk about that in a moment if we get there. Oh, I think we will. Okay. And because notice that this is not a number. There's something else going on here with our time signature. Okay. But notice that there are F sharps. Floating above instead of in front of. We're going to talk about that too. But we are going to use them. So got it. Okay. All right. So we have we just looked at the bass clef. We're actually before we do anything with this page, we have to look at one more page over here. We have some more things we need to learn how to do before we can do this musical example. Okay. So, first of all, cut time. Cut time is indicated by a C with a slash through it or 2/2. And it's a meter where the half note gets the beat, which is why the 2 is underneath. The half note gets the beat, and there are 2 beats in the measure. Why do we do this? Well, okay. Surprisingly, cut time is used for fast music, such as dances or marches, as well as for slow moving choral music. And the real reason is, I'm going to change the camera. And I'm just going to show you what happens. Okay. So if I were to conduct in 4, I go down, out, 1, bum, bum, bum. If I go fast, it starts to get kind of busy. Bum, 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 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. But if I go 1 and 2 and 1 and 2 and then I have a slower stroke that takes instead of 2 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, but I want to call it 1. I want to think of each of these as really a long beat. 1 and 2 and 1 and 2. Good. So it's really about the emphasis. Am I thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 1? It's very kind of spiky. Or am I thinking smoother? 1, 2, 1, 2, and so cut time. Now, So what happens in cut time is that 4 quarter notes, instead of being 1, 2, 3, 4, become 1 and 2 and. A half note is 1, 1, and 4/8 notes become 1 E and 2 E and. So it's just a different way of saying kind of the same thing, but it changes the emphasis. 3/2 indicates 3 half notes in a measure. 4/2 indicates 4 half notes in a measure. And so when we're practicing or working as an ensemble and we're just beginning and we're going kind of slow, we can say 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's not a problem. But when we get so that we're going faster, and especially like we're playing for dancers, we're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, that gets kind of messy. And so then we really want to use cut time. And the director will say, let's take this in 2. So we're thinking 2 beats for the measure instead of 4. So that's what that little phrase, let's take this in 2, means. And sometimes we say we're going to take this in 4. So that means we're going to count 1, 2, 3, 4. And it really has to do with kind of how fast we're going at the time. Okay, cut time. Musica ficta. Okay. First of all, in medieval and Renaissance Europe, only the notes that we find on the white keys of the modern piano were theoretically okay. And the reasons are definitely too complicated to explain here. It just had to do with the way they were thinking about music and the way they were thinking about scales. So by the end of the Renaissance, this was shifting a great deal, but especially in the medieval, in the earlier part of our time period, the white keys were sharped and flat keys did occur, but were often not written in the music. The performers were expected to know and understand a collection of rules which provided guidelines for adding sharps and flats during the performance. Now, that might sound a little complicated, and it is, which is why your editor will help you out, the person who's transcribed this music from the manuscript. Okay, these altered notes were referred to as musica ficta, fictional music, music that wasn't in the scale, but sounds we wanted. So modern editors write suggested sharps and flats above the notes to differentiate between the notes that were sharps or flats that were written in the original. And it's just to give you some clues about whether this is applying those rules or whether the composer specifically said, do this. Now, modern musicians don't always agree on how to apply the rules of ficta. And so I always suggest that players follow the editorial suggestions until they've studied music ficta and have their own opinions. And if I am your director, I will sometimes say, don't. And I'll sometimes say, let's add some. And sometimes I'll just say, keep those, they're good. So now we can go back to our musical example. So notice that we have notes using a bass clef. We have notes that have ficta. And we have cut time. So we're going to look at a little bit of all of this. So we're going to start by looking at the bass clef, the bass line. So notice that we have a whole string of quarter notes and a couple of half notes. So really, I'm not going to bother to write 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, but I'm going to write the half note to remind myself that that matters. Okay. That was quick. And because this is a dance, everybody has the same rhythm. So really, it's just those half notes that we have to pay attention to. So the rhythm is not what's the exciting part here. Now, let's write in the notes. Oh, I should mention, I am using I'm using ink here because I want it to show up nicely in the camera. I strongly advise that when you're writing in your own music, you use a pencil, because that way, as you learn a piece of music and you get to the point where you don't need so much stuff written in, you can take an eraser and make it go away. And then you have a much cleaner piece of music to look at. So I need my first note. What is it? Let's see. Top space. So all cows eat grass. That's a G. Now, this is a line. And so I can look for the middle line, and that's a D. I can also notice that it's in between two spaces, all cows and eat. CDE, that's D. Oh, those are G's again. That's kind of easy. Now, this is a space. All cows, that's a C. This is the bottom line. So it's what comes before A, G. Here's a D again. Why did I write that down there? And there's a D. And there's a G again. Now, something you might be noticing is that we're not having very many different notes. That is oftentimes true of the bass line. More G's. And there's a D. A G again. And D's again. So, now if I change my camera, okay. Now, okay, so I see that my first thing was a G. Now, because I'm playing, these are lower, I'm going to move over on the piano and I'm going to move to a lower G. And I'm going to remember that G is between the threes on the left-hand side. So that's a G. I'm going lower, D in the doghouse, back to the G's. And then C is next to D. And I need a G way down here. Back to D in the doghouse, back to the G. Now I'm going to jump an octave to the G, back to the D, and there's a G and a D. And that's a 1, 2, 1, 2. So if I do it again, G. Now I can keep track of where I am. I know I'm just going to need G's and D's for most of the time. G, D, G, G. Here's the C. Drop down to G, D, G, 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 D, G. 1, 2, 1, 2. Okay. Now, so that's the bass line. And wrong camera. Okay, so now we want to think about the treble clef. So I'm going to pick this line that has that ficta in it, just so that we get to practice thinking about that. So this is fourth line. When I look at my chart, and it's a D. And the top line is F, but I want to say F sharp. And What's above the F? Must be the next note in the alphabet. A, B, C, D, E, F. Here's G. 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 Okay. Because there's some other things that I want to cover, we're just going to take that little bit over to the piano and see how that's going to work. What the F with the F sharp. Okay. So I see my D in the doghouse, but I'm going to do a lower D because of that 8 underneath. So there's D, E, F, F sharp. So D, F sharp, G, G. That's how it starts. Okay. Now, okay. Okay. Accidentals. There are 3 different accidental symbols, and we've already seen a flat sign that lowers the pitch and a sharp sign that raises the pitch. There's one more. The natural sign undoes a previous flat or a sharp. Now, flats or sharps at the very beginning of a piece, the key signature, affect the whole piece, or at the beginning of the line, affect the whole piece. But sometimes we have flats and sharps that are only just for part of the song. So a flat or a sharp sign in front of a note lasts until the end of that measure. Remember, the measure is the place where the line comes. So a natural sign can undo either a key signature or an accidental that was earlier in the same measure. So a natural sign also lasts until the end of a measure. So in a measure, you can have a sharp appear and then a natural appear after that, and you undo the sharp. Okay, so that's accidentals. Ties. We saw a curvy line earlier that was a slur that connected 2 different notes and made them be smooth. A tie connects 2 notes that are the same in pitch. It acts like glue, creating one longer note that lasts as long as the 2 notes added together. So the tie was actually the last bit of music notation to really solidify, and it comes after SCA time period. And a tie makes it possible to have notes of any length. Notice that if I want 5 beats, I can have a whole note tied to a quarter note. And that way a 5 beat note doesn't have to have its own picture, and a 13 beat and a 15 and a 17 and for that matter a 9. They don't all have to have their own notes. Remember, we had a chart that had not very many note values on it. And so we only had to learn a few pictures because they add together. I can't find my page. Here we go. Okay, so not too many symbols. So, but I can add these together to make different length notes. The other thing that a tie does that's super important is it makes it possible to have a note that's bigger than the measure. So a tie makes it possible to carry one note through to the next measure and not play it again, but just keep counting. And we're going to see that in our next musical example, which is page 14. Oh, one more thing. There we go. So sorry. Let's take a moment. Here it is. Okay. The other thing we need before we do our next musical example, ledger lines. Sometimes we need to go above or below our staff. So the staff is the symbol of 5 lines that the notes and the clefs sit on. Now, you might have noticed that sometimes notes go higher and lower, but if we had all of these lines, like 9 lines, our eyes would just kind of be boggled by it all. 5 is a good number because we can see it. We can see that's the middle, that's the fourth, I can easily look at it and see that that's the high one and the bottom one and the second one. But if we started to get a whole bunch of lines beyond that, then it just becomes really hard to tell what's going on. So we just have 5. But we have ledger lines that are temporary lines that help us when we have notes that are higher. So here's A. B sits above, just sits on top of that top line. C gets its own little ledger line. D sits on top of that C line. E, another line. F sits on top. G, another line. And so ledger lines can either go above the staff or below the staff. In this case, bass clef is going up. All right. Now we can look at Coventry Carol. So let's see what are our little notes. So first of all, it says the key signature of B flat, right there it is, affects the whole song. Notice that the B flat is on both staffs. There is no time signature. A half note gets the beat, but the number of beats changes from measure to measure. And this is not uncommon in music from the SCA's time period. So I have a half note, a whole note, which is 2 in cut time, 1, 2 half notes. Here's a third one and a fourth one. So there were 4 half notes in the first bar, first measure. The next measure has 2 plus 1, has only 3. So, here's something, a dotted whole note. Well, if a whole note equals 4, then a dotted hole is going to be 4 plus half of 4 is 2, 6. Or if we're in cut time, it's 2 plus 1 equals 3. Okay, so we've got change. That's 3. That's 3. That's 3. But we started out with 4. So, here's one that only has 2 half notes in it. No time signature. Okay, here's another curious thing. The tenor line and the bass line share the same staff, which is why we needed ledger lines, because the tenor is sometimes in the bass land and sometimes above it. The tenor part uses ledger lines. Now, notice that the lines for the bottom part go down, the stems go down, and the stems for the top part go up. That helps us see which part is which. Pay close attention to the accidentals. Here we have an F sharp written in, don't forget the B flats, and then we have a B natural. And there's a B natural right there, and an E flat. So, I think we could take a line now and look at it. We should look at this tenor line and see what to do with the those ledger lines. So, okay, my first note is sitting above one ledger line. So there it is. That is D. And again, and again. Now, what is this? Well, that is sitting right on top of the bass clef, and that's a B. And there's another mnemonic. B is above the bass. Notice the natural sign, B natural. Back to D. Now this is sitting above two ledger lines. 1, 2, there we are. That's F. And another F. And now above the bass, that's a B, but this time it's B flat, C, and D. And that is as far as we're going to go. Now, Coventry Carol is a 3-part song, and it moves along fairly slowly. So I'm change cameras. I'm definitely going to think about this in slow half notes. So that whole note is going to count 2 counts followed by 2 half notes, and it's a D. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 1, 1, and then I'm going to find my B natural. 1, 2, back to D. 1, find the F. 1, 2, and now I'm going to find my B flat and my C. Those are quick notes. They're on their way to D. B flat, C, D. So my first note was long. 1, 2, back to the beginning. 1, 2, D, D. 1, 2, D, F. And these are quick. Bum, 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 bum. So that's the beginning of the tenor line. Just to kind of see what we're going to do with what we would do with those F sharps. Let's look at this. So if I go back to thinking about treble clef, my first note is on the G line. G, G. That's the beginning of face. That's F sharp. Back to G. Now that middle line, oh, that's kind of a reminder. This middle line is B flat. F, A, face, A, G goes through the curlicue, G, and here's our F sharp. Remember I said that B flat and F sharp were the most common? Here they are. So now, oh, hang on. Wrong camera. Okay, sorry about that. Here's my G, G, F sharp, back to G. Middle line is a B flat. You can even kind of be reminded by that flat. A, F, A, C, E, there's A, G, F sharp. Okay, now back to the camera. Okay. All right. So now I'm looking at my G, and I remember that G is in the threes on the left side. G, G. Here's my F sharp, back to G. And now I go up to B flat. Next door A. This is quick. G. Okay. Okay. So a few minutes ago, we discovered that sometimes the half note gets the beat. The other thing that's important to know, change your camera, Beth. Alrighty. Okay. Sometimes the eighth note gets the meter. And so 3/8 and 6/8. Meters with 8 in the bottom almost always come in sets of 3. So we have 3/8 and 6/8 and sometimes even 9/8 and 12/8. So you want to think about how can you get to 3. So you can get to 3 by having 3/8 notes connected together. You can get to 3 by having a quarter note, which is 2/8 notes, 1, 2, and an eighth note. You can get to 3, a quarter note, 2/16, which is 1. So let's clap these. The first one is 1, 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The second pattern, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1. This one, getting kind of fancy. 1, 2, 1, and 1, 2, 1, and 1, 2, 1, and. A lot of medieval music is in 3/8, 6/8, which is why I wanted to get. We'll have an example in a moment of a song that does this. So notice that I could have the long note first and the short note, but I could also have the short note first. 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2. Okay? Or I could tuck in 2/16. 1 and 1, 2, 1 and 1, 2, 1 and 1, 2. And finally, a dotted quarter gets us 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay. So now so our next musical example is really what's new in here is thinking about 6/8. Okay, what is, oh, all of the treble clefs have eighths underneath. So it all could be played or sung an octave lower, but you also can play or sing it in whatever octave works for you. 6/8 meter, there we are. The eighth note gets the beat in their sets of three. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Measure 3. Count this measure. Let's write it in. So the dotted quarter was 1, 2, 3, and 2/16 are 1 and 1, 2. Now let's go back to the beginning. Right. And the tiny notes indicate details about the original manuscript. Play them like regular notes. So first of all, dotted quarter, 1, 2, 3. Again, 1, 2, 3. This is this pattern. 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1. Okay, there we are. So our first pattern is 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, and 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Now we're going to need to add some pitches, some notes for that to start to sound like something. So now I need to go back to treble clef and figure out what these notes are. Okay, so the first note is a line, and it's on the fourth line up, D. This is part of phase. F-A-C, back to D. C. Just before C is B. Back to C and D. Notice that we're just kind of going up and down. Here we go again. C, B, A, A. Okay. Now, as I go over to the piano, I'm going to start by thinking about where the fast notes are. Because if I practice the fast notes first, it's easier to learn a song. So I see those fast notes, and I see that there's C, B, A, and C is right here, B is next to it, and A. So I'm going to go C, B, A, C, B, A, C, B, A. So now I kind of know what I'm doing when I get there. So my first note is D in the doghouse. 1, 2, 3. C is next door. 1, 2, 3. Back to C. To D. 1, 2. C. Now 1, 2. C. Back to D. 1, 2, 3. Here's my fast part. C, B, A, A. So we'll do that again. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3. C, B, A, A. And that is the beginning of Alle Salate. And there's one more page of information that I want to talk to you about. And then this is plenty of information to get started on. Okay, so one more thing about meter. So we've been using a counting system that indicates the lengths of the notes. And this system describes the ebb and flow long and short notes. 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, for example. There's another system that also accounts for the place of the note within the measure. Change camera. As you become more fluent with reading music, you will want to switch to this system. We will use dance as an example. That was our very first example. Okay, so 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, rest becomes, notice that I'm going to account for the 3 beats in the measure. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Each beat is numbered. So the beginning of Viva La Musica is another example. 1, 2. Ah. Oh, right. 1, 2, and 1, 1, and 1, 1, 1, 2. Becomes 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. And where is that example? Ah, here we are. Okay. So here I am. This was 1, 2, and 1, 1, and 1, 2. Now I'm going to make it count into the measure. 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. So the numbers represent the regular beats, and the ands and the dashes represent the rhythm. So the dash tells you that those beats are kind of connected to each other. They're all one note. 3, 4 is a half note. But we know that we had a quarter and a half note. 1 and 2 eighth notes. But here we're going to say 3 because it's the fourth beat of the, we're going to say 4. The fourth beat of the measure has 2 eighth notes on it, 4 and. So more often than not, musicians will use this method of counting. The method that we've used is very, very useful when you're beginning to figure out how to read music. But when you get more fluent, you're definitely going to want to shift to being able to indicate the beat as well. And I think that that really is the last of the information that I wanted to cover. You have many musical examples. They are all lovely music. And once you've got them decoded and figured out, I think you'll enjoy them. But I'm not going to fill your mind with any more ideas. So, are there questions?
We'll give people a moment to type. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and type them down and let me know. I have an amazing class comment. I don't think we have any questions. Lots of stuff to absorb. Yes.
Lots of stuff to absorb. So the fact that this is going to be recorded, I hope is useful so that you can go back and look at it again. And you know, you can even with the notice the section that you want to, if there's a section that you want to like listen to more than once, of course you can figure out where it is in the recording. But I know that this will be eventually recorded, will be up right in the handouts. I'm
Yes, it'll all be connected in one space, so it'll
so
be easy to access.
yeah.
Yeah, and Karen Arian says the handouts are great sources too. Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you for sharing your vast knowledge.
You are welcome. I just feel like being able to read music is a little bit like being able to read a book. It's not necessary for a good life. Many people have wonderful lives and never learn to read music, but it opens up the possibility of opening up a book and playing a song that you didn't already know. And it's pretty cool. So I like to share that with other people so they can do it too.